Hi YouTubers. Tonight I'm going to show you a series of albums that came from a pile that are just on the floor here that I haven't sorted out yet. Albums that I picked up in 2009, and a lot of them I don't even remember buying some of these, but here they are, and I'll just show them to you. So the first one is Sweet, Desolation Boulevard. This album came out in 1975. Sweet were a British band, and this album has the hits Ballroom Blitz and Fox on the Run. And what's kind of interesting about this, to me at least, is this is Steve Priest, who was the bass guitarist and a singer in the band at the time. And 1975 I was managing a record store in Oshawa, Ontario. And a guy came in the store and he said, "Hi, I'm Steve Priest's brother." And he was. And Steve Priest's brother had emigrated to Canada, and he was one of my customers. He had a disc jockey service in Oshawa called Sweet Sounds, and Steve's brother would come in and check to see how well this album was selling, and the Sweet had several very good selling albums. This might be the biggest seller they had. Sean Cassidy, this is his first album, Do Run Run, and he does a lot of really good covers of 60s songs on this album. It's kind of a surprising album to pick up, but it's really not that bad. Sean Cassidy is now about 51 or 52 years old, so he's almost as old as me. And inside the album there's a Sean Cassidy poster, which kind of surprised me. How this didn't end up on some, on some girl's wall. Autographed. Not really. Paul Jans, Electricity. Paul Jans was a Canadian recording artist, 1980s. I know nothing about this album. Apparently now he is out of the music business and he's in London, England, and teaches theology. Simon & Garfunkel, Sounds of Silence. This is their kind of groundbreaking album. It was their second album, the one with the electric version of Sounds of Silence, and it has I Am a Rock. Beach Boys, Made in the USA. This is a double album. It's a greatest hits album. And liner notes, good liner notes by biographer David Leaf. The reason why I picked this up, I'm a very big Beach Boys fan, and this album contains a couple of releases, or a couple of songs from the 1980s that they recorded. Rock and Roll to the Rescue, and a cover of the Mamas and Papas' California Dreamin'. Also, it has some songs from the Pet Sounds album, and it has alternate versions. I think 3 of the songs on here are actually alternate versions from the Pet Sounds. The Kinks, Lola versus Power Man and the Money Ground. This album is from 1970. It's the Kinks album that had their monster smash hit Lola. This is a German copy. Now this is an oddball record. It's just one of those weird ones that you find. The Two Sides of Bobby Orr. Bobby's instructional commentary and interview as interviewed by Don Earl. Now, as all of us Canadians know, Bobby Orr was one of the greatest hockey players of all time. Played for the Boston Bruins late 60s, early 70s, but his career was cut short by knee injuries. Those are the kind of knee injuries that they could solve quite easily now, but 40 years ago it ended his career. And it's a gatefold. There's a picture on the back of Bobby looking out of a window. Elton John live in Australia with the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra. Double album, gatefold, some lyrics in here. And I've read that this album was the last album that Elton released before he had surgery on his voice, or on his vocal, or his throat. And since then, his voice really isn't what it was back in the 70s and 80s. I saw him on TV a couple of years ago. I think it was the Diana's anniversary, 10th anniversary of her death, and his vocals were just brutal. I don't know how he was on the Grammy Awards the other night, but I don't know if he still has his voice, unfortunately. The Jam, Dig the New Breed. This is a live album with performances from the late 70s and early 80s. Paul Weller, of course, went on to form Style Council. He's had a great solo career the last 20 years or so over in Britain, but we don't hear too much of him over here in Canada and the States. Journey, Raised on Radio. This is from the late 80s. I'm not really familiar with this album, but I noticed that Randy Jackson from American Idol plays bass on this one. The Arrows, Stand Back. The Arrows were a Canadian new wave band, although late new wave. I think this one came out about 1983 or 84. Had a couple hit singles on it. And here we have some clean-cut kind of new wave guys here. 4 guys in the band. This is the second Arrows album. I believe they had only 2 albums. Terrible cover on this album. Not much to look at. You turn it over and see the band. There's 6 of them here now. And they all have big hair all of a sudden. So they went from being a very tidy new wave band to being a band with lots of hair and lots of mullets. And the late 80s were a time of terrible hair. And the last one I'll show you is the Police, Senyata Mandata. And in hindsight, 30 years later after the fact, this is from 1980, the Police don't sound as good today as they did back in the 80s when they were very popular. I really liked the Police back then, but I listen to their records now and they really sound kind of muddy recordings, and they don't sound as good as what I thought they did 30 years ago, unfortunately. Sting is a great songwriter. Andy Summers is a great guitar player. But I think this is what I'm going to do with this one. Thanks for watching.